fake HOA cop pulled his gun and pointed it directly at my wife's chest. "I need you to comply with the regulations immediately," he said, his voice shaking slightly despite his attempt to sound authoritative. My wife Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she just stared at the man, one eyebrow slightly raised, her grocery bag still in hand. "Sir, I strongly suggest you lower that weapon," she said calmly. Her voice was steady, almost conversational, like she was discussing the weather instead of having a gun aimed at her. The man, wearing a cheap uniform with Highland Park security, poorly embroidered on the breast pocket, hesitated. Something in her tone made him uncertain. What he didn't know was that he wasn't threatening just any suburban housewife. He was pointing a gun at Major Sarah Reynolds, Special Forces Commander, with 15 years of combat experience and 3 tours overseas. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching, like the video, subscribe the channel. I watched from our front door, heart pounding. We'd only been in the neighborhood for 3 weeks when the notices started appearing. First, it was a warning about our non-regulation mailbox height. Then came citations for unapproved garden fixtures and excessive holiday lighting, despite it being February with no decorations in sight. Each notice carried the official-looking stamp of the Highland Park Community Standards Division, and increasingly steep fines. When I had checked our closing documents, there was no mention of an HOA. Our realtor confirmed the neighborhood's homeowners association had been disbanded years ago after a corruption scandal. Yet here was this man, badge gleaming in the sunlight, gun drawn over a supposed driveway parking violation. "This is your final warning," the fake officer continued, his gun still aimed at Sarah. Behind him stood another man in a similar uniform, filming with his phone. "Your vehicle is parked at an unauthorized angle, and you've accumulated multiple violations. The fine is now $750, payable immediately." "I'm not paying you anything," Sarah replied, setting her grocery bags down slowly. "You're impersonating authority figures, issuing fake citations, and now brandishing a weapon on private property. Those are serious felonies." The man's face flushed. "We have full enforcement authority under Community Regulations Section 5.7. This neighborhood has standards." "What it has," Sarah said, taking a single step forward, "is a pair of scam artists preying on people who don't know their rights." The second fake officer stopped filming. "Bill, maybe we should just issue the written warning and—" "Shut up, Mike," snapped the first man. "These people need to learn respect for the rules." What happened next occurred so quickly I nearly missed it. Sarah moved forward in a blur of precise motion. Her right hand shot out, gripped the man's wrist and twisted. There was a yelp of pain, and suddenly the gun wasn't in his hand anymore, it was in hers. In one fluid movement, she had the weapon disassembled into 3 pieces. "A modified pellet gun," she said, examining the parts. "Painted to look like a real firearm. That's another felony." The first fake officer was on his knees, clutching his wrist and cursing. The second man backed away, hands raised. "We're just doing our job, lady. We're authorized by the community board." "There is no community board," I said, finally finding my voice as I stepped outside. "And my wife just disarmed you because she's a Special Forces commander. You picked the worst possible house to pull this scam on." Both men froze, their faces draining of color as they looked at Sarah with new eyes. "My husband's calling the real police now," Sarah said, pulling zip ties from her pocket. She always carried them, a habit from her military days she'd never explained until now. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back. We're going to wait here quietly until they arrive." Remarkably, they complied. The fight had gone out of them the moment Sarah had taken the gun. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they found a surreal scene. My wife calmly waiting with 2 zip-tied men sitting cross-legged on our lawn while I served everyone lemonade. The responding officers could barely contain their amusement. "You disarmed him?" asked Officer Rodriguez as his partner secured the suspects. Sarah shrugged. "Force of habit." "Military?" "Special Forces. Just retired last month." Officer Rodriguez whistled low. "These guys picked the wrong house." The story could have ended there, a simple case of would-be scammers choosing the wrong target. But what unfolded over the next few hours revealed something far more sinister. As neighbors began gathering at the police cars, whispered conversations turned into open confessions. Mrs. Chun from across the street had paid $350 for having non-regulation wind chimes. The Johnsons had been fined $500 for their son's basketball hoop. Elderly Mr. Peterson, living on a fixed income, had paid over $1,200 in various fines over 6 months. They said they'd put a lien on my house if I didn't pay, he explained, his hands trembling. I was afraid I'd lose my home. The police search of the fake officer's vehicle revealed a gold mine of evidence. Official-looking citation books, a list of repeat offenders, mostly elderly residents and single women, counterfeit badges, and a ledger showing they'd collected over $27,000 from our neighborhood alone in the past year. This wasn't just our neighborhood, Officer Rodriguez explained as he showed us a map found in their car. They've been running this same scam in 4 different communities. Always ones where the real HOAs had been dissolved, so people were confused about who had authority. That evening, as news vans pulled up and reporters gathered, Sarah and I sat on our front porch watching the circus unfold. So much for our quiet retirement, I said, taking her hand. She smiled. In Special Forces we have a saying, the most dangerous threats are the ones you never see coming. I'm pretty sure those guys feel the same way about you, I laughed. A week later we hosted a neighborhood meeting in our backyard. Nearly every household showed up, eager to meet the woman who had exposed the scam that had terrorized them for months. Sarah, dressed in casual clothes that still somehow conveyed authority, addressed the gathered crowd. What these men counted on was isolation and fear. They kept you afraid to talk to each other, afraid to question authority. That stops today. She outlined a simple plan, a real neighborhood support network, regular community gatherings, and a system for verifying any official-looking notices that came to our doors. We don't need fake authorities telling us how to live, she concluded. We need neighbors looking out for each other. The plan took root immediately. Mrs. Chun volunteered her legal expertise to help neighbors file for restitution. The Johnsons offered their backyard for monthly cookouts. Even Mr. Peterson, still shaken from his experience, offered to help create a phone tree for elderly residents. The fake HOA officers, whose real names turned out to be William Harker and Michael Dunn, were charged with multiple felonies: impersonating law enforcement, fraud, extortion, assault with a weapon, and criminal conspiracy. The district attorney discovered they'd been running similar operations in neighboring counties for over 2 years. You exposed their whole network, the DA told Sarah during a follow-up interview. We've identified at least 20 victims who were too intimidated to come forward before. 3 months later, our neighborhood had transformed. The fear that had kept people indoors, blinds drawn, was replaced by children playing freely in front yards and neighbors chatting over fences. The community garden Sarah had proposed was thriving in what had once been an abandoned lot. On a warm Saturday evening, as we walked to the Johnsons for the monthly neighborhood barbecue, Sarah stopped suddenly. "What is it?" I asked. She pointed to a slow-moving car with magnetic signs reading Lakeside Estates Security, cruising down an adjacent street. "New neighborhood, same scam," she whispered. Before I could respond, she was already walking toward them, phone in hand, that familiar determined expression on her face. "Sarah," I called after her, "this isn't our neighborhood." She turned back with a smile that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her 20 years ago, that perfect blend of compassion and steel. Every neighborhood deserves to be free from intimidation. I sighed and followed her. After all, retirement was supposed to be about finding new purpose, right? The next day, another neighborhood meeting was called, this time in Lakeside Estates. Sarah stood before a new group of confused and frightened residents, explaining how the scam worked and how to protect themselves. "These predators count on your isolation," she told them. "They want you afraid to question, afraid to connect with your neighbors. But together you're stronger than their fake badges and empty threats." Word spread quickly. Local news picked up the story: retired Special Forces commander takes down fake HOA scammers. More neighborhoods reached out, each with similar stories of mysterious authorities appearing with citations and threats. 6 months after the day a fake HOA cop pointed a gun at my wife, Sarah was invited to speak at a county-wide community safety conference. She stood at the podium, now comfortable in her civilian clothes but with that unmistakable military bearing. "The most dangerous predators aren't strangers lurking in the shadows," she told the packed auditorium. "Sometimes they're walking your streets in broad daylight, wearing uniforms and carrying clipboards, counting on your confusion and fear." The district attorney's office used the evidence Sarah had helped gather to launch a broader investigation, uncovering similar scams operating in 12 communities across 3 counties. In total, the various fake enforcement groups had collected nearly $300,000 from residents, many of them elderly or otherwise vulnerable. As for Harker and Dunn, they accepted plea deals and were sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge, during sentencing, made a point of addressing Sarah directly. "Major Reynolds," he said, Your community and indeed this entire county owes you a debt of gratitude. Your courage exposed a predatory scheme that had terrorized hundreds of homeowners. After the hearing, as we walked to our car, a reporter approached us. "Major Reynolds, do you have any comment about the sentencing?" Sarah considered for a moment. "In the military, we're trained to protect against external threats. But sometimes the threats closest to home are the ones we overlook. These men counted on people's respect for authority and their fear of challenging it. The lesson here isn't just about fake HOAs, it's about questioning those who claim power over you." That night, as we sat on our front porch watching the neighborhood children play freely in the street without fear of citations or fines, Sarah smiled. "You know," she said, "when I retired, I worried I might miss the sense of purpose, the feeling that I was making a difference." "And now?" I asked. "Now I realize there are battles worth fighting everywhere, even in the suburbs." The next morning we found a small package on our doorstep. Inside was a handmade plaque from the neighborhood children. It read, "To Major Sarah, our neighborhood hero." Sarah hung it by our front door, next to our non-regulation welcome sign that was now 2 inches taller than any HOA would ever allow. A small act of defiance, perhaps, but an important reminder that sometimes freedom starts at your own front door. And if you drive through Highland Park today, you'll notice something peculiar. Many of the houses have mailboxes slightly taller than standard, garden gnomes in unexpected places, and holiday lights that occasionally appear at non-holiday times. Not out of disregard for aesthetics, but as tiny symbols of liberation from fake authority. As for the fake HOA cops who pulled a gun on my wife, I sometimes wonder if they realize how lucky they were. They thought they were intimidating an ordinary homeowner, but instead encountered a special forces commander who had faced far worse threats than a poorly painted pellet gun. In the end, they gave our community an unexpected gift: the chance to transform from disconnected, fearful neighbors into something stronger and more resilient. All because they picked the wrong house, the wrong woman, and the wrong day to play make-believe authority figures. Sometimes, the greatest act of service isn't fighting enemies abroad, but exposing the ones hiding in plain sight at home.